Call this meeting to order. This is the Livingston Parish Ordinance Committee for Wednesday, December 21st, 2022. It is later than it should be, 5:15, 5:14. Lauren, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Girlinghouse?
Here.
Mr. Mack?
Here.
Mr. Talbert?
Here.
Mr. Ord?
Here.
All right. Old business. Item 3, discuss zoning, reclassification process, and ordinance. I'm assuming this is you, Shane, huh?
It is, but we discussed some changes to the classification and the land uses in the last meeting. I'm not quite ready to review that tonight. All the changes that need to be made, I don't think are made. Mr. Gomez came up and made a good suggestion on
Thank you.
continuing existing land uses. And you have a copy of it in front of you, but we don't have it in ordinance format yet. And so if you want to take this and kind of review it and, absorb it, and you feel like this is something that you would like to place in the ordinance, I reviewed it. I like it. I read it 4 or 5 times. I think that it's good to have some actual wording in here that covers transferring existing land use. Okay, basically, when you get time to read this, this will cover lots that have existing land use, today, and then even though they may be zoned differently in the future, they will be able to continue that same land use and transfer it to a new property owner per these definitions and rules that's written here.
I'll definitely have to read this.
Yeah, I know. You're gonna have to take your time and read through it.
Because it sounds like to me that it's kind of unzoning zoning.
It really doesn't. No, it doesn't. What it does is, like, say for instance this. Say you got a piece of property and it's currently being used for residential purposes. Okay. Say it's zoned R1 or whatever. It was supposed to be zoned. It is exactly what it is. But say it's in the corridor, the economic corridor, and it's zoned commercial. Well, this will protect the existing land use and allow the existing land use to transfer to the next property owner. Now, it's got some restrictions in here that basically says that you can't expand the existing use. You'll have to read it. It also says that if the existing use is, say, abandoned or done away with for a certain amount of time, well, then the existing use no longer transfers. Okay, example would be if it was zoned commercial, it's being used today as residential, and people move out of the house and weeds grow up and they just abandon the property for over 12 months. Within the future use, my understanding, my interpretation of the way this is written would no longer exist. It would have to be used for commercial in the future. So just take your time. We don't have it in ordinance format. And we got to make sure we got all the wording. Working with Sandy and them on this, and we're just not quite ready to introduce this yet. But this is a really, really good start, and it's a lot of good language in here, and I think it does protect the property owners, and it protects existing land use, so that, like, we had a meeting the other night on Area 5, Council District 5 being zoned, and one of the questions that came up from a real estate agent was that people want to know if the existing use can be transferred to the new property owner, and I just really feel strongly that we need to put something in writing that allows that to happen, and this is going to do that, and so let's, it's kind of, I don't know if we need to officially table it, but let's kind of work on this in the next 2 or 3 weeks, and we'll bring this back up in the next ordinance committee meeting. And then we can skip over B2. I just want to say a couple of things about that. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Sorry. Any discussion from the audience on this? You guys have anything?
So he got no discussion.
All right, so,
I thought this was for us to, what we were talking about all week.
It is. It's kind of a two-parter because we just received this today that Shane was working on, but there is an ordinance for the reclassification in your packet.
Yeah.
So 3A is kind of a two-part deal, something that we had talked about last meeting. And this meeting.
Which is basically us having all these parcels that we need to reclassify, and instead of us having to introduce it, then adopt it, we want to put it to where, I guess he said do an amendment to it, to basically say that we, up till December 31st of '23, we could do it by resolution with majority vote of the council.
Right, and it's to my understanding, and I hadn't really thoroughly read that yet, but what I can say about that I know so far is that, we had communicated that if someone needed to reclassify their property, they could do it by resolution through the council. Just contact your councilman puts it on the agenda, and then, we vote on it at the next council meeting by resolution to change the classification. Pretty simple process. Previous to that, a couple months ago, we adopted an ordinance to reclassify property, and it basically outlined a whole entire process to make that happen. So we needed to amend that ordinance to allow us to reclassify through the resolution via just a council vote until a certain date, like Jeff was saying, and then after that date, then follow the process that's outlined in the zoning ordinance that was adopted 2 or 3 months ago to reclassify, where you're required to notify the surrounding property owners and and have a public hearing and that type of stuff. So
Yeah.
that's what we're talking about here. Now, is that ordinance ready to go, Lauren?
Yes.
Okay, so that ordinance is ready to go. Now,
so that's B?
3A.
it's 3A, but if you look in your packet, it's 3.
Gotcha.
3A, right there. Well, I guess the change, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, Lauren, we're adding D to 11750.
Yes.
I don't know if you want to read that or talk about that, or...
Yeah, Mr. Moody just wanted an additional layer of protection when it comes to zoning, because usually zoning changes are done by ordinance, and we do have that established. Instead of doing just a general waiver to where y'all could do it by resolution, he just wanted to add in that 365-day transitional period, which will be January 1 to December 31st, 2023. So that the implementation of the zoning is in place, but the council may change the zoning, at any meeting by resolution, and, it gives it a specific date to end, which will be December 31st.
Okay, so that's above, this right here is above and beyond this, or is this actually?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so, all
So
right.
this is what we need to do now to send to the council.
That's correct.
Any discussion? Further discussion on that?
Nope.
Okay, I need a motion.
No, I'll make a motion to
Motion by
send it
Mr.
with
Ard,
favorable.
second by
I'll
Mr.
second
Mack.
it.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All right. Item B, discuss utilization of new online zoning maps.
Yeah, and what I want to say there is currently we have the Arcus map, the digital map. It's on the council website, but it's restricted with a username and password. Wasn't quite ready to turn it over and that be the official map. What I would like to do is work on that over the next couple weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, and then remove the username and password so that any and all can just go to the website, pull up the Arcus map, punch in their parcel number, and see exactly how their property is classified using that digital map. It's to my understanding that Alvin Fairman and them worked with the assessor's office. They created this map. It matches when it comes to parcels and land description on that parcel. It matches the assessor's office map, and so I'd like to start using that so that people at home can log in, they can look at their property, and they can tell exactly how they're zoned. The map that I was using, the PDF that's on the website, is a little more difficult to determine how certain parcels are are zoned. So I wanted to get that done over the next 2 to 3 weeks also. And so that's kind of where we at right there on that. And then the other thing I wanted to say was, remember the unclassified land use definition? Wanted to get y'all's feedback, the public's feedback on that. But I'm thinking at the moment that unclassified could simply be unzoned with a few non-allowed land uses. Couple of them that comes to my mind is, no business where alcohol is the primary revenue generator, or ever how we got this worded in this document already. And then, no strip clubs and things of that nature. And then pretty much just say unclassified is basically unzoned property, where you could put commercial, industrial,
But if you're putting restriction
anything.
on it, then it's zoned.
Well, okay, it is a classification. It's zoned, but it's very few restrictions.
So
How do you feel about unclassified?
everything's got a use. Everything's being used for something.
Okay.
So, if it's forest, just 50 acres of trees, then it's, agriculture
Agriculture.
or whatever. Everything's got a use. There's nothing in this parish that doesn't have a use that somebody owns. So, I think that if we don't have a classification, if that something fits in, we need to see about solving that problem. But I don't see any reason. If you remember, we talked about having a no-zone deal, and then there was a list of things that were in it. And if you remember, we stripped all of them out. That allowed you to do some things without going to address the, get your property zoned. Like if you got a piece of property that's unzoned or unclassified, you could, open a daycare was one of the things that we determined. And I thought, it was in it. And I think we stripped everything out of that, if I remember correctly. Because ultimately, unclassified property has no use, but if it has a use, then it can be classified. That's my feeling, but
Mr. DeLapp?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for recognizing me. I agree with Gary again. Unfortunately, the reason is it works for me in my area is that I have a car wash, a residential house, a daycare, then a residential house. I don't have the roundabout circle on Highway 22 is classified as unclassified, and they got a car wash and they got houses all the way around it, okay? So if not, then I got to say this one address is a commercial, the next address is residential, the next address is commercial. They already existing, so the unclassified is how Alvin Farber did those, and then we'll come back later and we can make a classification out of the unclassified property. But the unclassified property allows me to keep from having 500 people come up here and says, look, I'm residential, I'm here already, you got me classified as commercial. Or I could keep the same way as saying, look, I'm commercial, but you got me as residential. So you either residential or commercial, or you can be unclassified, and it could be both. That's the way that is working for me.
I'm basically saying that exact thing. I'm saying that unclassified property can be used for anything. There's no restrictions.
Except if you want to sell alcohol there.
Exactly. I was
So
going
then
to
it
put
can't
that
be
in.
used for everything.
Well,
I'm
most
just-
everything.
So, look,
I hate to-
like, Mr. Gladden, addressing your situation. So I've got this, you're talking about it 22 where they're clearing that land at the, okay. It's a state highway. There are two state highways that meet, traffic circle. We basically, if you front a state highway, you might live in a house, but it has the potential for commercial development. So I think we talked about something earlier, and I think in that deal, you could zone all that stuff commercial. And the people in the residential would be non-conforming. You say like you're non-conforming. You know what I'm saying? And as long as somebody lives there as residential, it will be residential forever. But if they choose to sell it, they have the ability to list it as commercial and get more money for it. You'll sell about a square foot instead of selling about an acre. You know what I'm talking about? And the zoning's there because that is the future. Kind of what zoning does kind of a planning thing.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, we want to take these corridors and protect them. But we want to take residential areas and protect them too. So it's almost like if you've got a residential area, then you zone it residential. If you've got a commercial corridor and somebody's got a house on it, you can still zone the property commercial and say they're non-conforming to the deal.
And they can sell the house as residential.
If they choose at a later date to list the house, they don't have to jump through hoops, because what you're gonna find out later on is that somebody's gonna have a piece of property and somebody else is gonna want another use for it. And people are gonna be signing purchase agreements contingent upon I can get the zoning changed. But if you have a house in an area that's already commercial, you shouldn't have to go through that hoop to get that thing zoned commercial. You ought to be expected to sell it commercial. And so you could say it's commercial, it's non-conforming now. And as long as I live in it or sell it as residential, it can continue to be residential.
Well, and I think too, and just a second, Mr. Latt, if it's in a corridor and you have a house there, they can keep it residential. If they sell it, I think they should be able to sell it residential. The market's going to drive that. Eventually, there's going to be enough commercial business around there where that you might could get $350,000 for the house, or you can get $700,000 for somebody's going to come in and bulldoze that house and put a business up.
So look at one night. We talked about, if you go to the original master plan map, 190 is a commercial corridor. Think about how many residences.
Oh, it's tons.
Waste
Yeah.
190. So what are you going to do? We're going to say that they're unzoned. We're going to say they have no zoning, or we're going to say they're commercial and they're non-conforming. And as long as they want to live in that house or sell that house as residential, it can continue to be residential. But the day they want to make it commercial, they don't have to come back to this council and ask, because it's zoned commercial. I mean, that's a solution. I don't know. Go ahead, Mr. Doyle.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry.
You good. Yeah, I agree.
One of the things that works for me is, with it being unclassified at this time and later on, if you rezone it, is you give the public opportunity to be involved in it. Because I do have a dispute about a residential landowner who's been there forever, and they want to build a boat storage there. And I'm going to classify it. It's unclassified now, but I am going to classify it as commercial, because I think it should be commercial around that corridor. But there's, on the other side of the car wash, they want it residential, and I could agree with that, because that's how the community wants it. But that one gentleman wants to be different, and then that looks like I would side for him or against him, where if it's unclassified, it seems like the community has more input in it, is how it feels to me.
I didn't mean to cut in.
Go ahead.
I just want to say that I agree with both of you. What I'm trying to say is unclassified is just what it is. It doesn't have the defined land uses within it, which means it can be used for any purpose. To me, that's what unclassified is.
Any purpose, no restrictions.
No restrictions. And
Except for a bar.
Now, I was talking about,
What he just said.
if you don't agree, I mean, I understand that.
No, I'm just saying, if you put one restriction on it, it is not unrestricted.
Okay, so
one.
So can I ask a question? I'm just out of curiosity. So we say something's unclassified, which means it has no restrictions. And I perceive unclassified means you can't do nothing, you can't do anything with it other than what it is currently being used for.
Until you zone.
And before you can
No,
build.
that's not correct.
Well, wait
That's
a
not
second.
correct.
I mean, I'm telling you what my perception of
Understand.
unclassified is. My perception is that if something's unclassified, we have not defined the use.
That's the perception I would have too.
Because if we're gonna because here's the deal, if we're gonna have sections of unclassified property, then basically what you're doing is you're restricting some people within the community and saying you're zoned and other people are not. And that wasn't the intent. The intent is to zone property to, and Randy, I'm gonna be somewhat, I think that, look, so this guy's lived in this house forever, and it's residential. And there's this car wash that's been here 10 years, and then an open piece of land, and then somebody else's house. So you know, the homes are currently used for residential, but if somebody bought that house and wanted to rezone it commercial, the planning commission would have a hard time not rezoning it commercial because it is next to commercial property and it is conforming to what's in the community. Yeah, I mean, you understand what I'm saying? Once a piece of property abuts a commercial piece of property, it is conforming to what's existing there. You know, so you can't, if you don't do that, then you end up in spot zoning and
I think that's true to a large degree. I mean, but there has to be, eventually there's a breaking point,
well,
you know.
okay, so let's talk about subdivisions. Typically, you'll see a lot of subdivisions develop with an entrance and lots on the front, facing some highway, parish road, whatever. And then you develop a road back in it and you put a subdivision. Well, just because the back of that commercial property, as it could be zoned in the future, whether it be an office park or convenience store or whatever, touches a residential, doesn't mean, because there's a definitive, you know, this is the subdivision and these parts were developed as commercial. But if you're abutting a state highway, you know what I'm talking about, and there's a commercial property next to you, if somebody acquires the property next to that commercial, it is unrealistic to think that they could not zone that commercial because it abuts commercial and it's a commercial corridor, so it would be conforming to the land use as I mean, go back to the master plan.
Gary, I agree with that. That has nothing to do with what I'm trying to say about unclassified property.
Yeah, you're trying to, but what you're saying is that unclassified property has no restrictions.
Exactly. It's unrestricted, unclassified, unzoned. And it can be used for any purpose.
Okay, so
Come on up, Billy. Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, I just want to finish and I'll sit down. I like it the way it is right now. Because I do have unclassified property that's residential, and I do have it classified as commercial, because they one here, one there, one here. It's almost impossible to have one address commercial, next address residential, next one commercial. You got to have a bigger parcel of land and say this is zone commercial or residential. Now, having said that, suppose the residential sells like his place, like Gary said. Being it's unclassified, it should give me an opportunity to go ahead and zone it depending on what they want to use that piece of property for.
You certainly can. You can take an unclassified piece of property and reclassify it.
But if you put a restriction on it, I can't do that.
Yep.
If you put a restriction, I can't, and that's the only point I want to make.
That's not true. That is absolutely not true. That's an untrue statement. You can reclassify any parcel of property if you follow the process to reclassify the parcel.
That's true. That's a true statement.
Exactly.
But
So just because it's classified as unclassified don't mean you can't reclassify.
But if you say it can't have alcohol or it can't have this, that's a restriction. And
That's
that's
a restriction.
So can I point of clarity. So I think we might be saying the same thing.
We are.
I might be misunderstanding. So if I've got an unclassified piece of property, got a house on it, and I buy that house, are you telling me because it's unclassified, I can bulldoze that house and build a convenience store?
Yes, sir, I can.
Well, see,
That's what I'm saying.
I'm saying that's where I disagree.
Because it's unclassified, it can be used for any
Why wouldn't
purpose.
you want your property unclassified?
I
Everybody
want
would want their
everything
property
unclassified.
Which is exactly what we had before we had zoning.
Right.
Right. I mean, my deal is if it's unclassified, this is how I perceive unclassified. If it's unclassified
This man might answer some
and
questions.
we bulldoze the property, then before I can do something, I gotta zone it to build whatever can.
That's not why it
Go ahead, Billy.
unclassified was put in the ordinance.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of perceptions on what it is. So after last meeting, I said, well, to be able to properly explain to people who want to know what they do what they can do with their property, I need to read up on it. So I think there's a zoning called unclassified. I took 30 projects that we got and I went through every single one of them and said, what's the zoning? What are we doing with it? What's the zoning? Will it fit? And there was a couple of them that were unclassified. So I went to that section, and unclassified, it tells you what you can and can't do. So if you want to submit for a subdivision, you got to follow R1 zoning. If you want to submit as commercial, you got to follow this zoning. So it's got in there some guidance on what you should follow. So I know there's some perception there, but
Is
it's
that
actually
the
written in
latest
there.
and greatest updated?
I don't know if it's the latest and
I don't
greatest.
think
It's
it
a Word
is.
document. I thought it was, but I
It's
didn't go
blank,
off the website.
to the best of my knowledge. It's just a blank piece of paper
Okay.
under
But the one I had specific
unclassified.
things written in there, and it was a working
That was
document.
before.
Okay.
Well, I think that in my opinion, if you are unclassified, then whatever you do with that property in the future needs to be zoned accordingly when you do. If you have a piece of property with nothing on it and you want to make it unclassified, before you do something with it, you have to zone it appropriately. But, I mean,
Ms. White, when the ordinance was originally introduced, as I remember, when Alvin Fairburn originally drafted this ordinance, there was a section of property unclassified, and there was a list of 10 or 15 or 20 things that you could do with unclassified property without rezoning. And there was a couple lists of things that were prohibited. And if I'm not mistaken, we stripped everything.
I got to say something about that.
We stripped.
Except the not allowed.
Except the not allowed. So basically, unclassified property you can do nothing with it. There was a list of things you could do with it. We stripped all those out, so you can do nothing with it without rezoning it, as the way it's worded, as I understand it, the way it's worded now.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. And what I agree is that partially what you're saying is true. Okay, the reason that those against my will stripped that out of there was because you didn't agree to the land uses within the unclassified land use or classified, classification. You didn't agree to what was being allowed under that unclassified classification. Okay, so we stripped it out so that we could later come back and figure out what the unclassified parcel of property could be used for. And that's what this conversation today is about. We're going to go get a legal opinion about this, okay? And I guess as a council, you can write it pretty much any way you want because you're writing the law. But what I'm telling you is, initially, and we can get Eddie Idell up here, and we can ask him, initially, it was written so that the property could be used for the land uses within that, and it was very little restrictions. It was basically unclassified or unzoned property, okay? And it was created for that specific purpose, okay? We went and stripped it, like you said, right? And with plans to come back and redefine what it could be used for. To me, unclassified property should be used for exactly what Randy's using it for. It's not classified commercial, it's not classified residential, it's not classified industrial, it's not classified as small business. It is unclassified and it can be used for any purpose unless it has the exemptions that Lauren just talked about. We left some exclusions that it could not be used for, and that to me is the way it's written today. So if you have a parcel of property and it's zoned unclassified, you can put a commercial building there, you can put a residential building there. The only thing you can't do is what is not allowed to be used for, okay? And so I just kind of wanted to talk about that tonight and make sure that everybody is in agreement with that. And if you're not, I guess we need to talk about it some more. But that's what unclassified property is. It's not unclassified so that you can't use it anymore, and if you want to use it, you got to go classify it. That's totally not what unclassified is, okay? That's not what, in my opinion, its intended purpose.
all right, so clearly we need to
Work on that some more.
So, yeah.
AFA.
So let's move on. Item 4, discussion section 125-138, requirements and procedures for recreational vehicles. Who put this in here? Was this you, Gary?
No, this came over from planning. So earlier this year, Mr. Keene sponsored an ordinance about recreational vehicles because we have so many people in the parish living in them. You guys made some exceptions that you can live in an RV if you follow these, specific guidelines. I believe after reviewing some of the stuff, the intent of the ordinance was to help people that lived in RVs, elderly or building houses and things like that, to do them with more structure, more restrictions. The planning office is now seeing more people setting up like mini RV camps, kind of, but using the exceptions, so there's no way to deny them a permit for them to rent out these RVs that they're setting up legally to y'all's ordinance. So I put it in front of y'all. This is all our ordinance says about living in an RV. So,
Well, it says the occupancy permit may be issued for 24 months, but here it says, mobile home park or campsite without demonstrating costs for more than 180 days. All right, and then occupancy permit may be issued for 24 months for each recreational if they meet the following requirements. All right, so how about something in the language that says that the person, I don't know how you would do that, occupying must, you got to get,
You can't rent it out?
you can't, I mean, you would just say, where's the person who gets the water
owner of
bill,
the
the
title.
owner of the title has to live in the trailer or in the
title holder of
the title holder.
So, out of curiosity, so every RV is gonna have a meter pole, and they're all gonna have approved sewer systems? So that means they've gotta have modads hooked, they gotta be hooked to modads, is that, or they gotta be hooked to a, I mean, how are we regulating that part? I mean, it seems that would be fairly restrictive in itself, and then shall be addressed properly. We've already fixed it so that you can only have, we've introduced an ordinance that only allows you to have 2 addresses on a parcel of property, so the most you can have is 2. There's restrictions on subdivided property that allows 2.5 lots an acre. So it seems it's gonna be hard to set up a camp if they apply all the regulations that exist. I mean, if they've gotta have an address and there's only 2 allowed, didn't we pass ordinance that only 2 a lot?
Yeah, I think the issue now is that this ordinance went into effect before the new regulations. So now you have these little mini camps that are at least permitted for 24 months.
4 months.
So in 24 months, when they go back, they need something that says the owner of this needs to live in it.
Okay.
That would be my
Yeah.
assumption, so.
That the person living there must.
So that they can't set them up and rent them
Must
out?
own the property and the water bill and electric bill in their name.
I agree.
You can come up with the language, and we could introduce it at a later date, but
Okay.
you could say the occupant, whoever's pulling the occupancy permit
What's it-
must be the occupant
I
of
think
the
that
RV.
the whole 24 months is put in place for emergency purposes.
It is, it was a good thing.
So you don't want to, I mean, look, if it'll come back.
Hurricane hits your house, you can live in your camper for
Or you can
24
put it
months
there,
and while you
After
rebuild.
24, the occupancy permit, you have to come back before
Sure you do.
us, not just, you don't want permitting just to write.
I think you need something in there that prevents people from abusing the ordinance and renting these RVs out, putting
Yeah, because that's what's going to happen.
multiple RVs on
And-
multiple parcels of property and
you get
renting
a
these RVs out.
24-month permit, who goes in, I mean, planning or permitting should go check, but are they after 24 months? But that's kind of
Right,
not,
but if the next door neighbor complains, then you can send
then you can go over there and
send
be, yeah. Agreed.
the
Okay.
enforcement group out there.
You want to just,
Lauren can work on that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll work
all
on
right,
it.
so-
I just wanted to bring it up.
any discussion from the audience? All right. We had here, B, discussion to amend section 126, commercial developments. What we had here?
B and C are the same thing. They just didn't have a process for waivers. And I just added the same thing as the subdivision waiver. If there's a waiver that's requested,
Got you.
it goes through planning and zoning and then comes there. So that's a fairly simple ordinance.
good with
They're
that.
done if y'all want to recommend them.
Yeah, we can recommend that. I'll make that motion.
All right, Gary, anything?
You agree?
Jeff?
Yeah, I'm good.
Anything from the audience? All right, motion by Mr. Mack.
Second.
Second by Mr. Ard. All in favor, say aye. Aye. That's B and C.
Yeah, same thing for 4C. I mean, it's basically the same thing. It says,
We'll go ahead and vote. And,
shall make. I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Mack, second by Mr. Ard. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All right. D, discussion of zoning setbacks conflicting with setbacks set forth in Chapter 125, 126, and 127.
So I'm confused. So we've got building code, and question, tell me if I'm wrong, we got building codes that are set forth in 125, 126, and 127. You got our zoning ordinances are in conflict with that? Why
That
don't our
is-
zoning ordinance have the same setbacks that 125, 126, and 127 have?
I believe, let's look.
Can I ask a
So,
couple of clarification
building-
questions when you get a second?
Hang on, let her,
Did they give us specific examples of where the conflicts are?
This one also came from planning, and no, it looks like,
well, you got 190 when we did the setback on it.
yeah, I think that might be the only one.
Which-
And then the side yard is not in a couple of them.
But my question is, and help me if I'm wrong, why would a zoning ordinance change the
Yeah.
setback?
Yeah, I can
Unless
see-
it was- Unless
yeah.
it was, unless we were zoning.
I agree
for
with Gary on
garden
this.
Homes or zoning for zero lot line
Yeah.
homes. Why would the existing
Yeah.
building lines
Yeah.
not exist in any subdivision, however
Right.
it's set forth, or any commercial property? I mean,
Right.
you follow what I'm talking about?
I can see,
So-
I can
so-
see front width, but setbacks on the side and stuff, to me, shouldn't
We probably
matter.
ought to go, I would like to ask that the two council clerks that are assisting the ordinance committee go through our zoning ordinance
Yeah.
and see where setback conflicts exist. And let's eliminate them from the zoning part of it unless it is a zero lot line or garden home situation that we're creating that we don't address in 125, 126, or 127. And see if there are any conflicts. And if the only specific conflict we have is 190, then let's just exempt 190 from that deal because we made that specific setback
Yes.
for
Yeah,
the
for
building.
that.
I mean,
Did you have something, Randy?
No.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Come step forward.
Okay, we can do that.
I'm not a builder.
Okay, name and city.
I'm Darryl
What must be going
Rosto.
on right there?
I'm Darryl Rosto, own some property on 63 and 442. I spoke to Mr. Jeff Ord earlier today. I'm not a builder. I'm not a developer or anything like that. I simply bought some land 3 years ago, and 3 years ago, and had every intentions of building a couple of houses on it. So we have started moving forward with that. So we broke off a piece of this land. We're going to build 2 houses on it. Got down to it, went to permitting, need a second address. Can't give you a second address until you subdivide. Okay, we got to subdivide. Went to the McLean and had them subdivided. So as of, I believe we got the news today that that's not allowed.
Wait,
Because-
does this have to do anything with setbacks? We can only discuss setbacks.
I thought we were still discussing zoning.
No, discuss zoning setbacks conflicting with setbacks set forth in chapter 125, 126, and 127. That's the subject matter.
Okay, so when will we be discussing what I need to discuss then?
I don't,
I mean, I don't have anything on the agenda for that. I mean, we can all talk about it after this meeting.
Okay.
sorry.
Just want to say something about the setbacks when everybody's had their turn.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I just want to say that I would agree, when it comes to side setbacks and, setbacks on the rear of the property and things of that nature, we need to follow what's already in the ordinance. I would like to not strip out of the zoning requirements lot widths. So when you see the definition and classification section of the zoning classifications, and it talks about lot width, we don't want to strip that out.
Look, I didn't
Right, so did you say
talk
we
about-
get them to look at it?
I just want them to look at where.
Right. I know what you're saying,
I didn't
and I
want to
agree
talk
with
about
you.
conflicts. All I asked them to do was look at the different zoning requirements that we currently have, the current sections we have, and see in there where's there's conflicts on setbacks. I mean, I'm not talking about.
When you're talking about setbacks, you're not talking about front lot width, you're talking
No, I'm
about
talking
side.
about setbacks. I'm
Right.
talking about the 3 things: front yard, rear yard, side yard. It's
Right.
setback. Got nothing to do with
Right.
how wide the lot is.
Right.
So if they look at that,
all
they
that
can
out.
come and show us where I don't think 125-7 needs to be amended to concur with zoning. I think zoning setbacks need to be amended to concur with 125-7.
I agree.
Or they don't need to have setbacks listed. If you want to have property width, if you want to have lot width, that's fine. But what the setback of that need is not part of that deal.
Yes. Except for where it applies to 190.
Well,
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
well,
but-
I can tell you what it's about. If I'm not mistaken, we talked about certain size lots. And we talked about not building the house on the edge of the lot. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, some of the larger lots require the house to be built from a distance. Well, that conflicts with the setback deal. And so, it's not really, it's conflicting in the fact that you don't want to create a large lot subdivision and build on top of your neighbor. You know what? But let's let them identify it and see what our intent was when we created those distances, and see if it's a setback situation or if we're trying to center a lot on a house. And I really think that's probably overreach if we tell somebody you got to build your house in the center of your 3 acres. They ought to be able to build as long as it concurs with the building ordinance.
I agree. Mr. Delat?
I just want to go on record, I have the same issue with 7 lots on JW Lane about the setbacks, so.
Okay. All right, any further discussion for the audience? All right, that was E, discussion of large lot subdivisions, chapter 125, 125-1.
This was another just issue. For the definition of large lot subdivision, it says that the lots, it says large lot subdivision means the division of a lot, tract, or parcel of land into 10 or more lots with a minimum lot size of 2 acres and a max density of 1 lot per 3 acres. So there was some confusion. They need clarification.
Okay, well, it was simple. I got 30 acres. But the way a creek runs through it or the land is set up, I might not be able to cut out 10 3-acre lots. But the density of a large lot subdivision is 1 lot for every 3 acres. All we did is say that the minimum lot size is 2 acres, meaning you can't put
Yes.
9 quarter-acre lots on it, and then 1 big, huge lot. That the minimum size of a lot was 2 acres, but the density of it was 1 lot for every 3 acres. So ultimately, a 30-acre tract generates 10 lots. However, you could have 9 2-acre tracts and 1 12-acre tract, but you couldn't end up with 9 quarter-acre tracts, you know what I'm saying? And then 1 huge lot that ultimately somebody later on is going to try to buy and subdivide at a later date, because that busts the density requirement.
Yep.
And the waivers, because if you remember, on a large lot subdivision, you don't have to do a drainage impact study. All you've got to do is come up with a drainage plan. There is no drainage impact study, it's a drainage plan. So that's why we set up a 2-acre minimum, so that we didn't end up with a bunch of little lots and 1 big lot. Because if you have a bunch of little lots, the impact on drainage is going to be different than if you've got 10 large lots. That was the purpose of creating the 2-acre minimum.
You need to clarify that by ordinance.
No, now that we have it on video, I think that's good.
Okay.
I think that's fine.
Any discussion from the audience? Anything further from the committee? All right. All right, item F has been deferred until the next meeting.
We're done.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Mr. Talbert, second by Mr. Ord. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.